So, how you doing, Mike?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me about Alma and the Wolf.
Yeah, no,
Um,
thank you for coming to talk, for meeting me in this very, very intimate virtual space.
yeah. And this is your second horror film after Oregon Trail.
Yes.
I have
Mhm.
to be careful to not say Oregon Trail. It's tempting to say that, but um,
No one will know the difference, to be honest.
yeah, maybe not. Okay, fair enough. Um, I was curious because this is your second horror film after that film, and was there anything you wanted to accomplish with this particular horror film that perhaps you were not able to address or were able to accomplish in the last one you did?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know that it was a question of like, I never really thought of it that way. I think the thing with Oregon Trail was that it was allowing me to do a lot of things that I hadn't been able to, that I'd wanted to do that I hadn't done before in my career, which were a lot of the things result, partially, the Western setting, the getting out in the sort of like deep getting out into nature, into natural settings, shooting landscapes, um, delving into, a lot of my background is comedy. And there is an undercurrent in comedy of, comedy in some ways is sort of about suffering, you know?
It is, yes.
And I've always, even when I was working on television shows that were fairly lightweight or like romantic comedies, I would always say, like, to myself or to anybody who cared to talk about it, was like, the story is always got to follow the person who's suffering the most. Like, that's where all the juice is going to be, like, is to follow that story. And
Right.
obviously in a comedy, there's a lightness to it, or theoretically at least. But the idea of stories um, that are explorations of suffering is fairly natural to me. So whether it's a sort of like a movie that, like, Oregon Trail is very specifically about the nature of suffering, like that's what it is in all of
Mhm.
its aspects. Um,
Mhm.
and this one, and even the comedy I made movie many years ago, the Drop Dead Gorgeous, is in a lot of it revolves around how people suffer for certain things. In this one, I think what I wanted to do is I wanted to expand slightly out of that, both outwards but also inwards. Like, all the suffering in this movie is largely focused inward in the
Mhm.
main character, but it's exploded from that inward space outward into a lot of expressions of genre. So that's the thing that I was really interested in doing, was that kind of like being able to not just make one horror movie, but to be able to make all of them. You know what I mean? So there's sort of like, this movie is it's a monster movie. It's got body horror, it's got folk horror, it's got weird sex craziness, it's got Silent Hill, dark woods, misty nighttime woods, tortured forests, and a lot of witch imagery and stuff like that as well. So it's working in all of those genres, and it's quite and also even like in a little bit of horror comedy as well, um, and trying to sort of meld all those together, or not even so much meld them together, but it's sort of like run rampant in between them. And then and then with the proviso that I knew that with this movie I could end it. I could, in the last 20 minutes, not just make it like, oh, that was fun for me to experiment with seven different types of movies and run them all together. Like Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail is three movies. That, like, the second movie, like, the second movie kills the first movie, and the third movie sets the second movie on fire. Like that's how that movie really works. In this one, there's many different movies, and there are all these different braids that sort of like wind together, and I think are challenging. Were challenging for me as a filmmaker, but I think are also challenging for the audience to go back and forth between them. But the great pleasure for me was to be able to take all those things, braid them together, bring them together in an ending in the last 20 minutes, and have the ending not only not be obscure, but to be like definitive. Here's the reason why all of that happened. Here's the reason that it justifies all of it, and also is a surprise and lands a pretty significant emotional hammer blow. And on top of that, and on top of that, promises like I think also promises that in this age of streaming, like you can watch this again.
Yeah.
Like if you get to the end of this movie, like you can't, it's hard, it'd be hard to get out in front of what's happening in the movie. Maybe someone will, it doesn't, but that's okay too. Um, but the last 20 minutes tie up all the loose ends, but also promise you that if you were to watch it again, you'll experience a different movie.
That's a good point because yeah, there's a lot of different horror elements in here. Yeah,
Mhm.
monster horror, body horror. Was there one above the other that you were more specific and focusing on?
Well, I mean, the most specific one to me, the one that underlies a lot of them is the sort of like interfamily like thing. There's like, the not the biggest the most popular recent version I can think of off the top of my head is Hereditary. The sort of
Mm.
like interfamily horror elements like that. So that's happening in this movie, and that is providing a lot of the emotional underpinnings of things. It's providing the sort of like there's a philosophical underpinning that the movie provides that keeps it on its ground, and there's an emotional underpinning that keeps its feet on the ground, and it's the father-son relationship specifically, and specifically the notion of the father himself trying to place what it means to be a father and to live up to his responsibilities as a father. Like that's has a lot. That's the sort of like underlying thing of it, which is and of course then the son in this movie is played by my son.
Right.
You know.
He's quite good in this film too.
Oh well, thank you for saying that. I think he's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah, I think he's really good. I hope that he'll get some recognition for having done this role. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
quite a good young actor and quite unusual in his energy.
Yeah. I mean, since she's one of those kids who, because of a fractured family life, has had to grow up a lot sooner. And
Yeah.
it's always interesting to see how the kids sometimes are the more mature members of the family than the
Hmm.
parents are, specifically the father in this case.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see him play the slightly different versions of that character that crop up in a few places and how they're not exactly like night and day. They're similar, but just enough apart from each other that you can see like how one of them exists at the beginning of the movie and a different one exists at the end of the movie.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and I find it interesting how um, this movie sort of deals with how we sort of deny ourselves the truth for the longest time, and that it eventually comes back at us in a very horrifying way.
Right.
Um, the build up to that is very good, and you have a lot of very emotional acting going on. And I just spoke with Ethan and Lily in
Oh yeah, they're
regards to
terrific.
that. They
Hmm.
were terrific. Yeah. Um, how did you help guide them in their performances?
How did I help guide them? Well, I mean, first thing is this is that they're both fantastic. So, Ethan, being able to play, you can see probably just from meeting with Ethan how like he's a guy who can play both the version of Ren, the main character. He can play the version of Ren who appears in the beginning of the movie in the interrogation room, where he seems to be he's very convincingly one way, and the Ren at the end in the lake, who is very convincingly has gone a very far distance, but he's very convincingly able to encompass physically with his body, with his being. He's able to encompass both of those people together. Like that's a real challenge, and he really does it. So for me, and Lily, being the sort of like a sort of like woman of mystery throughout the thing, you can't quite put your she sort of as the movie skips around between genres, she skips genres too. Like she's the one she moves like from this genre to that genre to this genre, and she's quite adept in all of them. But it's okay for her character to be a little more fractured. Like her character doesn't have to resolve from, and in fact, it's part of I think getting the audience involved of going like, wait a second, is this the same? This like she's not the same in this scene as she is in that scene, and that's deliberate. And there's a reason, and you find out that reason later. Like, why is it that she's not the same? She doesn't seem like the same person all the time. Um, but working with them, how do you get a performance out of them? Is I think the most important thing any director can do is you just respect them. You cast the right people, and then you respect their input. Like we worked really hard up in Oregon. We had a lot of time because we had a lot of crappy weather. So we
I
had a
heard.
lot of time, which we were asking for. We wanted the crappy weather, but we had a lot
Okay.
of time to, sit in my house and, rehearse and go over the script and, rewrite things so that they worked specifically for them, that they were the best version of both of those actors that we could put on screen together. So part of it is realizing that, any director, you make a movie, you have to have a vision because otherwise the movie just never happens. You can't put it
Hmm.
together. So, but a vision isn't necessarily like this is how the movie's going to be. It's not a vision is not a picture, like a finished picture. A vision is a process. And the
Hmm.
process for me involves, knowing where we're going, but also being able to like take the any opportunity that other people's opinions, the people you've invited into the vision, all need to be, brought in and accommodated, and you need to have them be utterly self-realized inside of the big process, and then it makes it a little bit easier for even with crappy weather conditions for the actors to be
Hmm.
good, and we did have some crappy conditions.
Yeah, I kind of noticed on the film.
Yeah.
So I understand you had a shooting schedule of a little over 20 days, but how much time did you have for rehearsal?
I try to rehearse. We rehearsed for about 2 weeks.
Oh, good.
Well,
Yeah, I
because it's
keep.
it's pretty remote, and that doesn't mean that everybody was there for the whole time of those two
Mhm.
weeks. Ethan was. Ethan came early because Ethan, is dedicated and he was available to come do it. And he also is a bit of an outdoorsman, so he enjoyed being up there, you
Oh,
know.
good.
And Lily was there for a lot, and my son just came up there and like lived with me for a while, and the other actors would come by the house, and we would just every night try to do a little bit of rehearsal, rehearse a few scenes, and then I would do some rewriting at night for the next day, and I'd do my pre-production during the day, and then we'd rehearse at night, and it was every night was a little bit like a rehearsal slash dinner party. Um,
Nice.
it sort of so especially it's a nice thing about shooting out on location too is it builds a kind of like familial esprit de corps that hopefully shows up in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's
Yeah.
nice to hear. I keep hearing stories about people either don't want to rehearse or they never seem to have enough rehearsal time. And it seems like rehearsal for a movie like this is especially important.
Yeah, it's especially important because there's a lot of things for the actors to be aware of like where am I in the story?
Hmm.
That I think all worked out pretty well. But I think it's good too. And everybody, I think also the more you rehearse, the more confident. This is my point of view: is the more rehearsal happens, the more confidence people have when they show up. And you don't have to do exactly what you rehearsed. The thing that you're doing is you're building a sort of base to work off of. Like you don't
Right.
necessarily want to do exactly what you did in my living room. You want to do what's presenting on that particular day, but you want to know that you're not starting from nothing. You're starting from a particular base, so you can say like, oh, maybe not that, maybe this. You're developing it forward. You're already starting with like the 10th draft. You know what I mean? Instead of the first draft.
Right. One other actor I wanted to talk to you about because she was a classmate of mine at UC Irvine is Beth Malone,
Oh
who
yeah,
I thrilled to see her in this film and
yeah.
in anything. And how did she get cast and what was it like working with her?
My God, Beth is. I mean, first of all, Beth was above our head for that role. Like
Oh yeah.
we should not have been able to get Beth Malone to play that role. But I mean, knock on wood, the lucky thing for both her and also for Jeremy, who played Murph, was that they were both available because we were going to shoot the movie before that big strike. So we were
Right.
heading in, and we were just about to start. We were just about to start pre-production when it was the loan company actually before like the week before the strike actually happened. They were like, "Nope." They just said, "You have to hold on." Well, they're just like, "Press pause on that for a second." So
Hmm.
then we were basically ready to start the movie. Ready to go
Hmm.
start in earnest pre-production in Oregon. The second the strike was over. So the second the strike was over, so we had the opportunity once it looked like the strike was going to be over to like go out and try to find actors, and nobody had worked for 6 months. So some of the people in the movie were added sort of last minute. Not Lily and Ethan had been on board the whole time, but some of those people were just like, yeah, I'll come to Oregon for a couple weeks and play the role. Been a while since everybody's worked, so it was really great to have someone of that caliber playing that role. Also,
Hmm.
she's phenomenal. She's great.
Yes.
She's always bringing something different on every take. I mean, she's just a super pro, and she's just a delightful person as well.
Oh yes, yes. I got to do a number of productions with her. She is one of the most delightful human beings I've ever had the privilege
For
of
sure. What a joy to
knowing.
have on set. And
Absolutely.
jumping in all the time with like, she even like she was very helpful in lots of in a few situations where, you know, a more sort of like I don't know how to say it, like an actor who's a little more delicate in their sensibilities might have been bothered.
Hmm.
She's just like, hell no, let's do it. Let's go.
Sounds about right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, when you first came into direct horror, what was it like? Because you said like, comedy and horror deal with suffering,
Mhm.
and very true about comedy, but what was it like approaching the story without the aid of the light touch of humor?
Well, I mean, the movie, both this movie and the previous horror movie I made do have comedy in them. There is an element
Hmm.
of comedy, but you're right. It is a little bit different, and you have to honor you have to be able to sort of like put your foot on the neck of the thing in a way that, and grind a little bit in the way that would not, suit comedy. Um, I think that for me, the one of the big things was that I think, like I mentioned before, is that a lot of, there are a lot of sort of like emotional colors and things with photography and things with sound and costuming and everything that, because I came to comedy not because I wanted to be a comedian, but like when I was in school, what I wanted to be since the time I was like 14 was I want to make movies because I loved movies.
Right.
So comedy's been great and it's been wonderful to me and I would never in a million, and I love it and I love comic actors and stuff like that. But it had been decades and there were things that I had never gotten a chance to do that I was really sort of like, I just want to be able to go out and shoot vast landscapes. And I want to be able to shoot really interior things or use like editing patterns that are disassociative, or I want to be able to do things that are off-putting to an audience. So I want to push an audience around in a different way. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I want to be more tonally adventurous, which a horror movie really allows you to do. In fact, it's almost mandatory to be that tonally adventurous, I think, in a horror movie because it's when it's so hot right now, but it's just like one of those things like people expect, I think, a little more out of a horror movie than they do out of, for instance, like a rom-com, Like a rom-com has to, for the most part, stays in its lane. A horror
Hmm.
movie can veer all over the highway, and in fact, it benefits from that, from the danger of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, horror I go to more quickly than rom-coms, mainly for the reasons you point out.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, this movie goes in a number of different directions, which definitely kept my attention throughout, which is the sign of
Hmm.
a really good film. And when it came to shooting the scenes with wolves and the
Mm.
sheep, what were the
Mm.
challenges there for you?
Well, I have to tell you, that was challenging. Those sheep were challenging. Um, Early in the process, ugh, I'm gonna tell you this story. So
Okay.
early in the process, I had the sheep didn't exist in the original draft of the script.
Oh, okay.
Like they were, there's a lot of, I mean, the script was developed. We developed the script along, but I added those in, and because I wanted there to be a predator prey relationship
Mm,
as part of the thing going forward, and I wanted to include the element of prey that worship their predator,
hmm.
and in a sexual way, as it turns out in this movie. But so that was so I wanted to do that, and I had seen the movie. Is it Lamb? I think is the name of the movie.
Hmm.
It's the movie with, I think it's shot in Iceland, and maybe an
As
Icelandic
a
movie.
Numi Rapace, I
Yeah,
think was
Numi
it.
Rapace, who the original girl with the dragon tattoo.
Right.
Um, So I'd seen that movie, and they'd do some things with like sheep in that, where like all the sheep will go like this at the same time and look at
Hmm.
one thing. And I was like, okay, some of this is a special effect, but that's not. Like,
Right.
and then like it would stand still, like the goats would stand still or the rams would stand still and look at something in particular. And I was like, that is so unsettling. So I took it to our animal trainer was like, how do you do this? And they were like, no problem. You get a sheepdog and you blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so as it turns out, that didn't work out at all. Like, first day of shooting, I'm being told by the guy who's in charge of the sheep, who's just like, oh, incidentally, they're never going to do that thing that you asked us to make them do. It's like, well, we're standing here in the middle of the rain next to the ocean and it's pitch dark outside. What am I going to do? So, there's a lot of special effects that go into it. There's a lot of like trying for, having a lot of cameras running at the same time. A lot of sort of like, they're actually like some of those things. There's a lot of help going on in those scenes for those actual sheep and goats to do those things. The wolf, on the other hand, was a delight.
Mhm.
Wolf was the wolf is like the wolf was so nice. I was like, I remember I was in the wolf showed up. Wolves are expensive, so we didn't have it for a really long time. But
Mhm.
like the wolf was there, and I went up to the wolf, and I was gonna stay. I wasn't even gonna make eye contact with it. I was like, I'm gonna be really respectful. And it kind of looked at me, and it came over, and it kind of nuzzled me with its
Mhm.
big nose because they have such big heads. Real wolves have giant heads and big noses, and it kind of
Mhm.
nuzzled at my hand with its nose, and it wanted me to like interact with him. And I was like, I'm having like a moment with this wolf. Like
Mhm.
looking this thing right in the eye with this like incredible wild animal. But he was very well trained and he was delightful and I mean he did everything we asked of him in great time and he was very calm too. Like the barking is very a very showbiz behavior that it does. And his handlers were different from the other handlers. Those people they were delightful to work with and they had a delightful wolf.
That's nice. Sounds like a descendant of the wolf from John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, I remember on the commentary track, John Carpenter was saying the wolf was one of the best actors he ever worked with. Sounds
Yeah.
like you had a very similar experience.
Yeah, I think maybe there must be something inherent because of maybe the little bit of like dog DNA or something like that. Like I have a feeling that they're the kind of animals that if you care for them, they're very responsive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And this movie plays it blurs the line between what's real and what isn't. And I talked to Lee and Ethan about that. How did you help guide them through those specific areas?
Well, I mean, it's here's what here's an important thing. The important thing for Lily is that for Lily, no matter what, or for both of them, really, it's applicable. No matter what it is that they're doing, it's real. There's no, as far as from a performance point of view and from an acting point of view, there's never a moment where, as an actor or the character themselves has any knowledge that what's going on, what the level. I mean, everything that happens in it is real. It's just that it happens in different planes, sort of existence. But for those guys, this movie is happening in, real time. Um, and all the emotional things in front of them are happening for real. And even when different realities start to intrude on each other as the
Hmm.
film goes on, the Ethan in the movie, the characters in the movie react from the reality that they're in right that moment. So
Excellent.
it's all about staying real. So there's no, just like anybody else. It's like I mean, it happens like it's like deja vu almost. Like deja vu is like this weird thing that everybody experiences. So I hear,
Yeah.
you know, but it seems extrasensory in some way. But you don't react to it from outside from somewhere else. You react to it from where you are.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Or you have what George Carlin would call vuja day, which is like something that's just happened, has never happened before.
Never
What was
happened
that?
before.
Vuja day.